What can you learn from a painting? Matisse's The Music Lesson, painted in 1917, is an idyllic take on family life. Matisse's son Pierre and his sister Marguerite are at the piano playing some Haydn. Their brother, Johann, sits beside them with a cigarette carelessly resting in his mouth. And their mother, Amélie, is in the garden, quietly knitting. This post-impressionistic scene is full of sensuous curves and colour, and seems to describe a situation at odds with what we know of the strictures and rules that actually govern their lives. Pierre and his siblings had to remain silent whenever their father was working. They were called by a bell whenever Matisse needed them, and Amélie lived a life that forever came second to art. I love you dearly, mademoiselle, but I shall always love painting more. Clearly life was far from perfect, but maybe this was Matisse trying to give us his impression of perfection. The Music Lesson was painted in Matisse's house in Paris, where he had produced some of his most famous works, from the Red Studio, created in 1911, to the two enormous paganist visions of dance and music from 1910. These two works embody Matisse's fascination with primitivism, but also with his love of movement, rhythm and music. The flat planes and warped perspective of La Danse create a sense of continuous movement, and combined with the acid-bright Fauvist colours, elicit the same feeling of pure joy that comes from listening to and performing music. Matisse's 1917 canvas, then, seems to be from another world entirely, which makes this work from the year before even more surprising. This painting, The Piano Lesson, seems to be Matisse's response to Cubism. Where the music lesson is planted in reality, the piano lesson is distorted and surreal. Where the music lesson is sensuous and curvilinear, the piano lesson is geometric and restrained. Both paintings depict the same room from the same point of view, and both show Pierre at the piano, but they couldn't be more different. If one shows us an idealized vision of family life, what does the other tell us? Matisse was himself an avid musician and violin player. By the time he started working on the piano lesson in 1916, he'd been playing the violin every day for a number of years. Matisse took up the violin again at the beginning of wartime to calm his nerves, as Pierre describes, so he could approach his painting with greater freedom. His love of the violin can be seen throughout his work, to the extent that he often placed himself in his art in the form of an empty violin case or the instrument itself. So what makes this canvas particularly strange is that Pierre's principal study was also the violin. In 1915, having heard his father play regularly, Pierre asked him if he could take up the instrument as well. Matisse's reaction was, however, extreme. He decided that Pierre should leave school to study violin exclusively, believing he could become a virtuoso through practice alone. My father reasoned that with willpower, you can make up for time lost. Pierre was subjected to daily lessons with his professor, alongside 2 hours every morning of solfa from 6 to 8 AM. This is a pedagogical technique for learning sight singing and oral skills, where each note in a scale is assigned a syllable. And this is what Pierre is doing at the piano, not playing music, but sitting through a routine of what he considered mindless exercises. Pierre struggled, and his father showed little sympathy. The musician has to acquire a technique. That was all he knew. The work was beyond my power, and there was no fun in it for me. Mainly, I was stuck between the wall and the music stand, with the damn tick-tock of the metronome. So what is Matisse doing, capturing this experience, when it was clearly so arduous for his son? Let's look closer. The painting is constructed around large geometric forms, distorted rectangles and truncated triangles, the most dominant of which meet at a point in the lower third of the canvas, dividing the painting into two sections. The right-hand section shows Pierre, overlooked by what appears to be his piano teacher, sitting away back from him. But if we compare this to the music lesson from a year later, it shows us that this is actually a painting of a painting. Hanging on the wall in the room was Matisse's own Woman on a High Stool from 1914. Matisse has reduced this work in the piano lesson to abstract and muted blocks of colour, and has also removed a small picture from the top right, which was a version of a drawing that Pierre himself had done. By also changing the positioning of the hair on the figure, the woman has been made to look over the boy, who himself seems not to be looking at the music as he should, but instead at the metronome in front of him. The metronome itself is again reduced to geometric forms, which seem to mirror the brilliant green triangle to its left. We can also see the shape of the metronome reflected in Pierre's face, covering his right eye. Moving from right to left along the top of the music stand, our eyes meet the iron railing of the window, with its playful, swirling arabesques. According to Jack Flam, a leading Matisse scholar, these could well be the closest Matisse ever got to an abstract visualization of music. The music that he's imagining his son is producing. Dividing the railing is the large green band, which feels like a distillation of the green of the garden just outside the window. And finally, below it sits a bronze statue. This is one of the only curvilinear forms in the painting, and is a depiction of one of Matisse's own statues, his decorative figure from 1906. The two women in the piano lesson spar with each other. One rectangular, one curved, both with their gaze fixed on Pierre. One seems to embody rigidity, order, discipline, and lack of freedom, mirrored by the harsh edges of the metronome as well as the blocks of colour covering Pierre's right eye. And the other represents expression and emotion in its purest form. Pierre sits at the centre of these opposing forces, existing in a state of sort of submissive equilibrium. It's often been said that through this painting, Matisse was trying to capture the process of making art itself. A balance between reason and emotion, between process and feeling. This is something that's validified by the depiction of Pierre himself. When this was painted, Pierre was 16, but the boy in the painting seems much younger. Could this be Henri putting himself in the place of his son? Or instead, could it be a depiction of how Matisse saw his son in his mind's eye? After all, there was no easel in place for this picture. Pierre didn't pose for it, unlike for the music lesson. Matisse may well have been trying to hold on to this image of innocence before his son, along with his brother, went off to fight in the war. This perspective completely changes the way we look at the work. It transforms the painting from a grey evocation of a moment in a child's life into a father's intimate and fragile expression of his love. You know, whichever way you look at it, through Henri or Pierre's eyes, this painting is one of conflict. Even if Matisse didn't acknowledge Pierre's struggles, through making this picture, he shows that he was at least, on some level, aware of the pressures that he was putting on his son, and that he was afraid of losing the boy sitting behind the piano. Pierre and his father did go on to have a good relationship after these years, and Matisse even played a significant role in his son's career. But there's something very affecting about seeing these childhood moments captured in time, anxieties and unspoken truths preserved forever in paint. I think it's fair to say that art has an unrivaled ability to speak truth. And if there's anything to learn from these paintings, if there's any lesson, it's that truth, real truth, lies beyond what you can see. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching. This is my first video since hitting 10,000 subscribers, so I'd just like to thank everyone who supported my channel so far. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoy what I'm doing, do make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. I've got lots more planned. See you next time.